like for me, it was weird for me. Like Cruz said, like it was not something that I thought was like super cool or I found super entertaining. We just went and we saw the stone cold faces of the people who are asking my mom for her ID, and just like it just wasn't like a real welcoming environment. But then again, it like has to do with where you live and the people in your community. Like Tomas was saying, for him it wasn't like that. He went in there and everybody was on the same was on the same idea. So yeah, but moving on to our next question. We want to talk about the conversations that you have about voting. So what are conversations about voting like with you, your family, and your friends? Is there a sense of excitement or a lack thereof surrounding voting? And I see Kayla, and then we'll do Amir, then Christian.
So I think this very obviously depends upon the views of the person you're speaking about voting with. I think the common consensus of all parties involved is that everyone should vote. Hopefully that's the common consensus of all parties involved. However, I think depending on the candidate that you're supporting, kind of determines, how the conversation will go beyond like, oh, you're voting, who are you voting for? And I think it's because our candidates, which is often the case, but our candidates are two starkly different people in many ways, as far as their stances, the platforms that they stand on. Maybe not in character, but as far as their platforms, they're two completely different people. And so I think the conversations, generally speaking, begin as positive, like, yeah, we'll vote, everybody should vote. But then beyond that, it becomes more tense and argumentative, I would say, depending on who you're speaking to.
So with my experiences, like especially with my family and stuff, they told me like, sometimes it gives them like a little bit of an extra like especially this year of like anxiety and stress or whatever, because like the days are counting down, it's getting closer and closer and closer. And like depending who you're going for, it's like that can either make your day, from then on be pretty, joyful, or it can be a totally other different type of, vibe. So I think it's very, very important to discuss that with your family and around your family, just to get your ideas off and really be able to talk to somebody about this type of thing, because it's like the political climate right now is extremely, extremely intense, and we have to really let off steam per se and try to get our ideas out there, and really just communication is key in that time. So.
Well, I can tell you, in my family, it's everybody is like amped up to vote. But with friends and when I have conversations just out in the general public, I get a lot of mixed responses to that. There are a lot of people who are not as excited about voting. And I think a lot of that has to do with not really understanding the United States and how voting operates here. And I know we'll probably get to some of that later with some of the other questions. And it also gets to what Kayla was saying, but there are a lot of people who feel like it's a waste of time because their voice isn't really mattering, or their voice isn't counting. And so what I normally try to do is just kind of have a one-on-one intervention and kind of talk to them about that. But again, it's kind of mixed with friends, but with family, it's really a strong, a lot of excitement.
Yeah, if I could jump in. I feel like that's another thing that is really weird about voting, and it's more, you see it more this year than any other year, where when it comes to family, people seem to be on the same page. But then when you talk about your friends and your family friends, I've seen this a lot with my mom. It kind of gets iffy about the whole election. It's kind of weird how like relationships, like friendships are ending over the election, which maybe in this case it makes sense, but we've seen it in past elections. We've seen it in the last election, the election before that, where like friendships, like year-long friends, like 10-year-long friendships ending over one election. And I find that really strange and weird. but I'm gonna pass it on to Christian.
And I got a lot of things to say with Dr. Key and Everett there. Just to see friendships getting completely destroyed because of elections and stuff. And it's worrying to know that people are still kind of doing that. I understand why. It's just most of the time it's hard to talk about voting, for sure. But I just want to use like last year's election as an example where there were, a lot of people that were uninformed voting for their first time, voting for someone that has, no statistical value at all, as we could say. And a lot of people in that were just saying, Clinton's a woman, so let's just vote for the other one because why would we want? It's just depressing to see that. And that's why, I was younger at the time, but I still saw how bad that was. And for this year, no, Trump's the best, right? He did so great. Memes, it's funny to vote him back in. It's extremely hard because there's so many different dynamic views on it. And I'm still with my family, of course, saying it's stand up and vote for the right people, which, it's what we're doing for sure. But it's crazy to see all this stuff still going on. I'm sure it's going to keep going on. But as it is now, just do the right thing.
Kind of to chime in real quick, me personally, I can say me and my family kind of felt a myriad of different feelings towards this election, from fearful, kind of like nervous, kind of even a little bit of hopeless in a sense, because I've been seeing a lot of large Trump Pence signs everywhere. Our governor is, or no BS governor, and due to our lovely governor, and all these terrible signs. I've seen them, and the Biden signs I see, the few I see, they're like index cards, and the Trump ones are like billboards, and it's just that it scares us. So my family, we're kind of, like I said, fearful, a little hopeless, but at the same time, we're eager and we're ready to put the work in to try and have our voices heard as well as others. My dad, he's taking the whole day off, the days, maybe a couple days before. He's trying to drive people up there. How can I volunteer? How can I do all of this? And if you guys check out my parody I did about voting, social media world, I can give you some information on there about how to volunteer and whatever have you for the election. But like I said, with the hopelessness part, I feel like that's kind of another factor that really drives a lot of people away. They're like, oh, well, this seems like this person's getting a lot more attention than the candidate I want, so I'm just not going to vote. It has nothing to do with me and this and that. And I just want to let you know that's the exact mentality that's going to get somebody you don't want back in office. You gotta be eager. You got to be eager. You got to spread that energy with everybody else, because then everyone's going to be like, oh, we're going to win. Or they're all going to be like that in the snowball effect. Everybody's going to, do action. And I was also going to say, too, that even though we're really pointing out in the past, in this conversation, in the last one, yes, local elections are important, but still the general election, the presidential election, the president has the power to send special agents and certain groups and departments to your community, and they can go above your local government. They just, they just shoo them away like a gnat, a housefly. That's what they do to them. And they come over and do whatever they have to do. And, the president is the one who decides what wars we go, and things like that, how foreign policy. And I'll just say for the next one in Latin America, or for the Latino one, but, just, if you're out there, if you're Christian especially, or a believer of God like myself, you just educate yourself, because just if, they teach us in the Bible, the Beatitudes, 10 Commandments, to care for your neighbor. And if you looked at some of the policies throughout history that our government has enacted upon in other nations, whether it be the Middle East or Latin America, sometimes America is the reason why for their problems, like it's, for example, with the narcos and all that other bad stuff in Latin America, it's not just them, it's fuel to the fire, so I just wanted to point that out there too, like for all those people out there that are really about being ethical and kind to other people, kind of think twice, and don't feel hopeless. If you're out there feeling hopeless, cut that out right now and light some sage, do whatever you want. I don't know, just have hope 2020.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
those are
Go
some
ahead.
good points. For me, it's in my household, it's kind of like an expectation that we go and vote. And so we don't necessarily get excited in conversations and things like that. But with my friends, I'm kind of the opposite of Dr. Key. Some of my friends are really excited to vote. And then I have some people who kind of fall into that middle ground where they're like, I don't really like voting because I don't think that my voice actually matters. And so then we get into, discussions and debates and things like that. And so I think our generation does have a passion for it, at least at this moment. And yeah, it's a lot that's gone through this ballot. And so I kind of think it's interesting if you don't feel compelled to be either side or something like that. Because really, at the end of the day, we're choosing who represents us. And so you're picking the candidate that you feel represents you the best. And yeah, sometimes that leads to heated discussions. And personally, I try to still be friends with and listen to other perspectives different than mine. But I also understand that that's not easy. And that's not something that everybody can do. So I also don't blame anyone who feels like, this friendship we had, it's got to go because the things you stand for, I don't stand for.
Yeah, I definitely agree. You all have some really good points. One thing I wanted to point out is Tomas kind of pointed out his parody, and I just want to kind of shout that out. If you go to Fire810 at youtube.com, you can watch his parody. That's FPHYA 810.com or whatever it is at the YouTube channel. Just look that up on YouTube. You can watch his parody. It's really good. He has some really good information there. Go check that out. But we're gonna move on to the next question. Thank you all.
All right. Thanks, Everett. All right. Do you think the voting process in this country is flawed, and should it be restructured? All right. Kayla, saw your hand first.
I feel like everyone unanimously kind of like nodded their head and like no one said anything. So I think the fact of it's being flawed is kind of a well-known fact. Much of America doesn't agree with the continual existence of the Electoral College. Much of America takes issue with the fact that our actual popular vote doesn't choose the president, which is, fundamentally is democracy, is your actual vote choosing who actually enters office, not like this in-between system that America created, because at its inception, our forefathers didn't actually want democracy. And I think so we're reaching kind of a pivotal point in America, and I think in democracies in general, where we're beginning to recognize the flaws that were kind of written into our Constitution, the flaws that were written into the structure and the functioning of American society. And one of those being the process of us voting for a president. The fact that our voting system isn't exactly a direct connection to the final decision that's made. And so hopefully fairly soon, there's some actual work done surrounding that. However, considering the fact that the politicians and the people in power benefit from the fact that we don't technically have a direct line to them, I don't know how soon would be, but hopefully, considering the polls that have been taken and the number of U.S. citizens that don't agree with our current voting system, that hopefully we can set aside partisan issues for the sake of assuring that our democracy is actually democratic.
All right, Amir?
So I have the same sentiment that Kayla just said. So for me, I think our voting process has way too many like holes and everything like that. The way that voter suppression can come in. For example, just give me one quick example. There was like in Detroit, there was these hotlines that people would that homes would get calls from, and they would basically be almost like threats almost, and be like, oh, if this certain party's going to do this, blah blah blah, so on and so forth. I think it's just way too many avenues how people can just really twist it and really come up with their own type of methods, a way to try to get in and basically take control of the vote and really not give the American people the real type of, let's say, exposure or the type of voting count that they would expect to. So So I think that's a really big thing.
You got Cruz, and then you had Tomas' hand.
I guess I'll go first. I think there's a lot of issues, like how Amir was sort of pointing to. The fact that we believe that it's a right to be taken away in the first place, I kind of have issue with. As a citizen, I feel like that should just be something that you should be able to do. You should have a say in your country. I mean, that's the whole point of democracy to me. And I think it's strange that we set so many things in place to disrupt that, whether it's voter suppression or doing things like voter fraud, setting up systems to make it so that it's difficult to vote. You could pay your taxes online, and why isn't that a thing that you can vote everywhere online? It's things like that that make you question, like, where do we have our priorities? And then you stack that on top of, we got issues with how we can strip away the right from, let's say, felons and people like that. There's so many issues there. It's past the electoral college. I think it's sort of what Kayla was saying. It wasn't really set up to be correct. The forefathers, they weren't perfect, and we should stop acting like they were. And just like how we have corruption in our government today, there was corruption back then. And so there definitely needs to be change. I would like to believe that we could come to some sort of conclusion that's positive on both sides, where we just suggest, we need to change this, and so let's do it. But I don't know if people are stubborn. And so that's kind of why we need to be voting. These people do not belong in offices. They obviously have personal interest. Stepping into the lines of the electoral college, I know we're going to do that the next question, so I'm going to wait on that. But I definitely have something to say on that as well.
I kind of feel the sentiments of everybody, what they've said, that I feel voter suppression is always going to be here. I feel that kind of sometimes based on who is the head of state at the time will kind of influence how maybe severe it is. I mean, there's certain factors that have still remained throughout time, like, for example, the purging and the caging and the, lack of polling stations in Black and brown areas and things like that. Those are always going to remain around. The disenfranchisement is probably going to remain around because people know about our power that we have. People know the inmates who are predominantly Black in the system, they have a voice. They know the Black people have the voice, which is why they're trying to suppress them in their communities, as well as my people and everybody else who's vulnerable. It's disabled people, elders and whatnot. But I feel that based off the certain candidate that is in office, that there are sometimes more, the voter suppression is more highlighted and underlined because, you have people that are spreading this kind of rhetoric and hate-filled energy and whatnot. But real quick, I just wanted to point out real quick, I seen we had the lovely Mrs. Gutierrez in the chat. She kind of mentioned about, I want to point it out real quick. So she said that somebody that she knew voted for Trump last week because they believed, and they were part of a Christian church. I'm not trying to put any specifics out there because I want to protect their privacy, but basically they voted for Trump because they believed that God sent Trump to kind of be the person that kind of ends. Let me read the question partially because I don't want to mess up what they said about how God sent Trump to kind of end the times or something like that. And God is just trying to, prove his power. Me, how I'm going to respond to that as a devout Catholic Christian, we don't know God's plan. We don't know the day, hour, minute, millisecond, triplicsecond, whatever have you. We don't know when God is going to end the world, what his plan is for us as individuals or for us as a collective group. So I would just have to say to everybody that's kind of like, because I've heard that too, that, Trump is being sent by God to end it all for us. But here's my thing, in a way that's a little bit, no shade to the people that believe that, but in a way that's kind of disrespectful to God, because we're trying to make out of you and me about, kind of his plans and what he has in store for us. So I don't think that you shouldn't fall under that. And do you really think God is going to make us suffer? He doesn't, he doesn't want his people to suffer. I mean, we're already suffering enough, but I don't think God would intentionally put someone like that. The only person that is going to end the world is God. He said that in the book of Revelations. You know, he's going to have the 7 churches of 8. You know, I don't want to confuse anybody or whatnot, but basically, long story short, God is the only person that knows the time, hour, date, when the world is going to end, and we can't assume and plan that. So I would just have to say to all my religious folks, just remember what you were taught in catechism. Remember what you were taught in the sermon, lecture, preaching, service, whatever. So that's just what I have to say.
And I think a couple other people wanted to respond to that question, because her end of her statement was, do you guys have any advice on how to engage people that think that way? And I know Kayla wanted to respond. Go ahead.
So I would say to first lead with love, because I don't think that anyone is voting in either direction in order to specifically be hateful. I would hope. And I think you have to approach these people who believe that they're doing what's best for themselves, especially when it's a religious belief. You don't want to attack someone's religious belief, because oftentimes that's the foundation of who they are and how they function. I would ask that you question these people, like, okay, well, what does your God stand for? What principles does your God support? What ways of living does your God support? What ways of treating people does your God support? Does Trump align with any of those things? And if the answer is yes for them, okay. I'm not sure at that point, maybe you want to question their theology, but I think to truly vote for the end times, I think, as Tomas says, is to put the job of Christ in your hands. And I don't believe that's the intention of these people who maybe would vote that way. But so that I say that to say, engage with them with their own texts, engage with them with an understanding of their beliefs, and then truly educate them upon Trump's platform and what he stands for. And I think, like I said, if you lead with love and you're truly empathetic and enter it not with temper, but with a calm, even keeled mind, I think you're more likely to reach them where they are.
Anyone else want to speak to that before we pivot back to the other question?
Yeah, I wanted to just put a little bit in on that one. So I look at it similar to Tomas and Kayla, but I kind of have a different spin on it. So the end of her question is, do you guys have advice on how to engage people that think this way? And for me, I guess it was because I was raised a different way. But when I was as growing up, when you see somebody who's stuck on an idea, who think a certain way, you don't always shoot to change somebody's mindset. You kind of love them from a distance. You know, like, you don't always have to be the saving grace. You don't always have to be the one that comes in and changes the world for the better, but you can change it on your part. So it's not always up to you to change somebody else. And I guess that's how I look at it, because you can't, most of the time, 99.9% and a half of the time, like Tomas said, you're not going to be able to change somebody how they think religiously, because religious, that's embedded into the person. So you're not going to be able to change somebody's religious belief. But what you can do is love them from a distance, although they are voting and you don't think that it affects you in a great way. You don't hate them because they do what they do. Like, you can just love them from a distance. It's not always up to you to change somebody.
So I want to kind of add to that. Oftentimes I tell people, when you're dealing with people who may think differently or have different value systems or sets, you can't, and when we talk about religion specifically, you can't necessarily speak to change the religion, but you can speak to the evolution of the person, not always the religion. There are some people that have been in religion for years, and then all of a sudden they have this epiphany and their mind evolves and they grow in whatever their belief is. So just be intentional about speaking to the evolution, and know that evolution doesn't mean it's going to manifest right then at the end of that conversation. Sometimes you may just drop a seed and it may not sprout or manifest to a year or two down the line, or a couple of months, or sometimes 10 years down the line. But it does what it was designed to do. But I will say this is a larger conversation, because we all have to understand, and let's be really critical about this. Religion has also been used as a tool of oppression and suppression. People kill people in the name of religion. The slaves were forced to, and religion in scripture was used, slaves, obey your masters. This is right in the sight of the Lord. That's a scripture. So you also have to understand, it's not about the religion, but it's the manipulation of the religion and how people have been manipulated by leaderships in religion to do that. I think that every major religion has something to contribute to our value system, to our character. I believe everyone has some right in it and everybody has some wrong in it. And so I think that when we, and being a person who is a part of the Pentecostal church myself, and it's like, okay, some of the biggest supporters of Trump currently are in that in those types of reformations. And it's like, it seems as if racism is not a deal breaker for a lot of these reformations, which makes me now look side-eyed at the value systems that many of these have. But I'm glad that we're able to have these types of conversations, because it allows us to look deeper. Let's look at the history of religion. And there's a difference between religion and spirituality, right? Religion is a system that tries to, that I say religion is man's attempt to understand a higher power or God. And spirituality is a relationship that God gives you to understand who he or she, whatever your belief is, right? And so I think we get caught up in the systems that religion creates. And again, those systems forced those slaves to pick that cotton because they had to do whatever their masters told them. So I just wanted to say that there are those things that we just need to have in context when we think of, and a lot of people, one of my mentors, Mr. Deloney, used to say, just because you go to church, that don't mean you're supposed to stop thinking and using your gray cells just because the preacher get up and say, do A, B, and C. And if you know A, B, and C is going to make you sick, it doesn't mean that now you have no brain and you become this almost zombie-like creature that does what it's told. It's not like that. And I don't think God ever designed for any of us to be walking around like zombies, just coming off the manufacturer line, doing everything else that everybody else is doing. So anyway, I thank you, Jessica, for that conversation. That was a wonderful, pivotal point for us. Did anyone else want to respond to that before we go back to our next question? We have time.
To take an offering now. You didn't preach. We should sing. I just feel like,
well, okay, send all your offers to P.O. Box 44. No, I'm just playing. I'm not a televangelist. All right, go ahead. Back to our host.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you again, Jessica, for that question. Moving on, we're going to kind of pivot back to talking about the Electoral College. Do you feel the community in general is adequately educated on the Electoral College? And let me see. I see Christian.
No. Just no. So, and the Electoral College, it's in its entirety, is just a system, for sure. A system that shouldn't really be going on since, the very beginning of voting and stuff like that. It basically renders voting of the popular vote to like, this electoral, candidate may win, right? He may be winning because that's what you guys wanted us to do as a popular vote. And because of, Clinton v. Trump last year, that made it even worse. It just shows that they just like, you know what? No, popular opinion doesn't really matter to us. We'll just choose who we want anyway. But technically, what they're supposed to be doing is choosing for the state and then, choosing, in the wide band of their state, even though most of them just didn't listen to the state. Clearly, the popular vote was what the popular vote was, and that was for Clinton. And here we are with Trump, and that's still a joke and how he won. So, education in it, it's a lot of people know what they do. They just think it's, whatever, right? Like they can't do anything about it, but you can. And that's if you vote. More votes will make it a bigger gap and stuff like that. So if you, spend your time to vote, then the whole, oh, your opinion doesn't matter, I'm just going to choose who I want because the state said so, won't really be an issue.
I'm gonna go next. So no, that like Christian said, the answer is no. They also do that on purpose. When you take government class and U.S. history, they don't really talk about the electoral college much, and they do that on purpose. And the reality is, when it was originally created, it was supposed to be like a check and balance. It was supposed to be there just in case, things went wrong or awry. But really what it kind of was I don't think the people really know what they want. So I'm going to vote who I think it's supposed to be. And that's unfortunate. It really is. I think that there should be some sort of checks and balance system, but the electoral college definitely isn't it. Like, it's not doing its intended job. The fact that we need to vote for representatives is strange. And yeah, it kind of takes somewhat of the purpose out of it, like the whole concept of democracy. And I don't get why we've continued to act like, once again, this is such a important, integral part of our system, when its main use is just meant to be like, all right, my state voted a certain way, so I'm gonna vote the same exact way. Why do we really need that person? And it's because that person's there to sometimes ignore that, and that's silly. And I have a lot of issues with that, and I think it should be talked about more. The fact that it's not common knowledge is a large issue. Like, it's shown to be really important. I mean, because it helped, our current president win his election. But people don't want to really talk about it because they like that it's there. It's kind of one of those tools of oppression that we were talking about earlier. But honestly, I think it should be spoken about more, simply put.
I saw Kayla's hand up.
So I would agree with the two other answers, which is to say that no, I don't believe that the general public has a sufficient understanding of the Electoral College and the way that it functions within our election, our presidential election specifically. But what I also find interesting is the narratives that have been created recently by our current president, who was able to swindle his way, so to speak, into office, about how important a fair election is right now in 2020. He has all of a sudden become very dedicated to the democratic process the way that he imagines it, and is now the biggest advocate for everybody voting and the democratic process occurring specifically the way that it was intended to. And so I just want us to all be very aware and conscious of the narratives that are fed to us, even by our president, because as we've said, let's be clear, the popular vote, which is the vote of the land, which is, if we were living in a democracy, he wouldn't be in office. And so for him to all of a sudden value the democratic process so passionately is something that is self-serving and is done specifically to make the process of the vote less trustworthy to citizens whom he is the only source of knowledge from. And so I just want us to be clear that also simultaneously, while he is questioning the voting process, there are also people in these third world countries that we have labeled developing, who have leaders who are also questioning their voting processes. And so I just want us to be also conscious of the fact that simultaneously, while our president is questioning our voting process and making us feel as if he is the only trustworthy source of knowledge, and also simultaneously contradicting the professionals on many of the subjects which he's speaking on, there are people in third world countries that are operating under systems of communism, autocracy. There are, yeah, I just want us to acknowledge the fact, like, it's not coincidental that he would dictatorships. There are several other government systems that are operating similarly to the way that our current leader is operating. And so I think this all just feeds into our understanding of democracy and whether or not America can truly be considered one.
I saw Everett's hand up.
Okay, like everyone else said, I agree with everyone else. It's definitely not right how things are set up. You know how people are uneducated about something that's so pivotal in our society. How somebody can, you know, say, oh, go vote, but then not know about voting, not know what to do when to get there. Or we have these electoral college votes and people don't know what they mean. And it's just not fair to everybody else, because then we have situations like we're in now where we have a president that most of the country does not agree with in office, making decisions that most people don't agree with, but a select few, aka but a select few do agree with. So it's hard to kind of see change when every time we want to incite change, we have this flawed system that we're using to kind of get somebody else in here when that's not what the Electoral College wants to see.
So I want to say something to that. When we were talking about racism as a public health issue and some other things, people oftentimes, and I heard what you just said, Everett, and a lot of people use that term, calling the system flawed. The system really isn't flawed. It's not broken. It's doing what it was designed to do. And that was for some to benefit at the expense of others. So it's not that it's flawed. It's a system that perpetuates inequities and disparities, right? And injustices. And so the thing is not to look and fix the system. The thing is to evaluate the system and deconstruct this dysfunctional system, and then to reconstruct a system that has equity, fairness, justice, and that values all people. And so I think that that's part of it. But to your question, and I was just a sidebar, but to your question that was asked, I think that the Electoral College process is very flawed. It is very corrupt, because people are corrupt, and people create these systems to perpetuate corruption. And so, for example, you guys talked about it in the last talk show, and the census is directly tied to how many electoral college votes a state gets, right? How many people are in the census determines how many people in a district or in an area the electoral college gets. But then Tomas showed us last week about gerrymandering and how they can change the lines and manipulate the borders within those districts to either steal the majority or whatever. And so anytime you have systems that do this, and the thing that you have to understand about systems dynamics or systems engineering is that systems replicate themselves. And so when you have systems, the original system was the United States Constitution. And in that original government, that it declared that African people were 3/5 of a human being, right? From that foundational law that created all of the systems that we have all other laws, all other policies and procedures are always weighed against the Constitution. Now those words were amended, right? Later on they amended, but did we go back and amend the systems and the policies that were created to create those inequities, right? So this is a lecture I give. I don't want to go into it on here, but I just want to drop some of that knowledge on y'all and see if you like it or not. I'm going back on mute.
I mean, I really appreciate that, because that kind of speaks to the point of a racism not existing in America. How can racism not exist in America when the systems that we have are based off racism? So I feel like that's a really good point that Dr. Key put in there. I saw Kayla's hand, so I'm passing on to you.
I just want to say really quickly, and this is kind of a sidebar to a sidebar that was given, but I want us to also be conscious, because this is one of our last talk shows before the final election, that when you are voting, you're at this point not only voting for a president, but you're voting possibly for a Supreme Court justice nominee. And the Supreme Court justice nominee is one who actively fights to protect the Constitution as it was originally written. And the issue with that being that, as we've all acknowledged, the Constitution as it was originally written completely excluded entire groups and communities of our nation from rights, from these unalienable rights. I hope I said that right. Excluded entire groups of people from those rights. So just like quick sidebar, like at this point, it's become even stronger than the presidency, which is a 4-term thing. Like we know that even if Trump is voted back into office for another 4 years, that's 4 years. However, his nominee, that's a lifetime sentence or a term that she has. And so I just want us to also be clear about not only his impact, but the greater impact of his Supreme Court nominee.
Real quick, I was going to kind of point out too, along with kind of what Dr. Key was saying about how number one with the, just briefly, how the gerrymandering was used to kind of like, you know, suppress the regions, but also kind of my bad, about what he was saying about the corruption. Like, you know, just because someone works in the government doesn't necessarily they're working for you. Like you have people in the electoral college who vote differently than what the represented area votes for. And also I want to kind of make this clear out for you too, but a lot of us people, especially minorities, just because somebody looks like us does not necessarily mean we have to vote for them or they're in the favor of us, because there's certain people like John James, you know, have as much melanin more than me, or like all of us, we can connect, right? Like he would probably be pulled over by the police just like us as well, and people like him. And then, you know, then their inner their, you know, kind of like their mentality is of the people who's pulling us over, you know. So I just kind of wanted to point that out there too, that you can't always be biased as well. You can't, you know, kind of fall into the trap, because there's plenty of Latinos. There's that what's his name, I don't want to say nothing, you know, no names, nothing, but you know, I forgot his name, but he's been on CNN. He's like a Trump advisor, and he just rides Trump, just like he, you know, and just like, that's just my point. Just because somebody looks like you does not always mean that they're for you, and don't be biased. And we kind of sometimes have to watch out for like the celebrities, because celebrities have a large impact, and us as youth need to collaborate and have a, you know, a voice, reach the altitude like they do, because sometimes many celebrities are influencing people to vote otherwise, you know, vote against us in reality. So just peep game. That's all I have to say, you know, kind of be alert. But
so it goes to the saying, Tomas, you can be my color and not my kind, and you can be my kind and not my color. And so you just have to understand the values and all of that. So let's transition to the next question. I know we're time is creeping upon us, because the conversation is wonderful. Go ahead.
As much as like the chime in on that, it's kind of, it's like, just because you're famous doesn't always mean you're smart, and like, but anyway, we're gonna get on to the next question. What effect do you think social media has on this year's election? This one's doozy.
I see Amir. Go ahead.
Okay. Yep. So like, it's come down to like all these different platforms have different viewpoints. Like, you notice like they put up Facebook. Facebook has a bunch of just right wing stuff, and then Twitter might be more left leaning. So basically, it's like all partisan, like this mixing up, and it's not fair to people who just want to follow and just be like neutral and be like, oh, I'm not gonna vote for this party, I'm not gonna vote for this party, whatever. But I need clear, concise information and not just one opinion from each side. So that's my thinking on it.
Cruz?
I'm gonna respond with my answer being twofold. The first one is, it's kind of hard to ignore social media when our current administration uses it so frequently. He be on Twitter a lot. The second part is our society is so vocal now. Everybody has an opinion, and you're entitled to it. But what was mentioned earlier in the show is that people kind of kept it more of a secret about who they were voting for. And lately, it hasn't really been much of a thing. A lot of the people who suggest that they're going to vote, a lot of them tend to make their votes obvious. And from that, arguments, discussions come about. Sometimes, unfortunately, hatred, and that happens on both sides. But it's just awful to see so much division in our country. Like, we're supposed to disagree. That's normal. Each person, they have their own views. And the whole point of voting is to see the collective view, right? But the way that people are currently acting in our society, and at least American society, on social media is very unfortunate, sometimes extremely negative. And hopefully our next administration does their best to unite people.
Great.
Because we need it.
Okay, Everett had his hand up, Christian, and then Kayla.
So yeah, I really agree with Cruz, because I have an experience where, like, for me, social media is sort of a war zone right now. Like, some days you get on there and it's calm and people are laughing and joking, and some days you get in there, it's so divided between just the two parties. And then the craziest part to me is that it's not even people that can vote. The biggest divide is between people my age, 15, 16, who are saying things that their parents say, or saying things they see on social media that they think are right, and posting it and retweeting and reposting it. And it's just such a big divide because people are hating on each other for the smallest things, sometimes rightfully so. And maybe I'm a little wrong for saying that, but sometimes it's rightful, right? But a lot of the times it's wrong that we're, like, choosing to be against each other just because of politics. Like, politics was never supposed to be something that people fight over. Yeah, there's disagreements here and there, but you're not supposed to be having full-on battles on social media over politics. Like, that's not how it should be. So.
I gotta jump on with Cruz and Everett there. It's been mainly negative on social media. People find things that, just to start up fires and stuff like that. Also, there have been people that wanted to, incite fear and violence on social media with sometimes both groups, both left and right, can go say, oh, I'm going to go fight or something, tough guy or whatever, if I'm against my royal level or something like that. So it's been, a lot of negativity. There's obviously been a lot of positivity in that as well. And it's always good to find that. But negativity's been, again, just like Everett said, it's been flipping and fly. It's just been going back and forth constantly. So it's a war zone.
So I personally, and I don't know if this differs from what the other panelists have said, but I believe that social media in many ways functions the same way that society does. Although I do recognize the fact that people are emboldened by the lack of physical presence, I still think social media functions in the same way that we do within a society, which is to say that if there wasn't social media, we'd just argue. I don't think, now the difference being, if there wasn't social media, you wouldn't be able to meet someone and then go to social media and check out their profile and know a lot of what they stand for. However, I don't believe that, I don't believe that politics were ever something that people didn't argue about. I mean, the fact of the matter is we've had war. War is a result of politics. I think when America was created, it was because of politics. It's because we decided, like, I don't really like it here. I don't really like the way y'all move. I'm gonna come over here. I'm gonna steal somebody else's land and I'm gonna move differently over here. So that is to say that I don't think at any point politics has functioned without some sort of heated debate, which we call argument. Social media, though, I do believe definitely will impact this election in the same way that it impacted the previous election through memes and the sharing of information. The previous election about how often certain things would show up on people's timelines, certain memes would show up on people's timelines, and how that informed their vote. Because the fact of the matter is, in the age of technology, much of our information is coming from social media. And so there are studies that counted the number of times that, for example, Russian ads would show up, or ads and memes about Hillary Clinton's emails, or ads and memes about with Trump's face on the American flag. Like, these things do actively form people's, whether they recognize it or not, the way that people make decisions when it comes to our elections, and also the way that people decide fact. If someone finds Trump more relatable, or whatever the case may be, because he's on Twitter constantly, like he's for us, he's the president for us because he can tweet with bad grammar, that actively will inform the way that they perceive Trump, and that's the fact of the matter. And so you know, it's for some people, the fact that our current administration, aka Trump, spends so much time on social media, that fact is like cool for them, because it's like, wow, he can't spell, I can't spell either, you know. So these things, I don't want to be rude, but these things connect people, and I think social media does that. And so anyway, I digress.
Okay, we have Kiera.
So I just wanted to jump in and say, so I just let y'all take y'all time because I really appreciate y'all dialogue, and it's really not a need for me to jump in nearly as much because y'all got it covered. Now Jasmine is here with us in spirit, and she texted me a couple comments that she want me to incorporate as well. But the first thing that I'll start with is when Dr. Key, you ended, and you were talking about the contrast between people who are us, but not really us. And one thing I think you even said it on an earlier talk show that I like to say is all skin folk ain't kin folk. You know, that is more than just political views. A big deal is the economic differences between some of our skin folk that makes them not kinfolk. And I remember one of Dave Chappelle's stand-ups when I can't remember where Dave Chappelle lives, but he was talking about, he was standing in line, and wherever he lives is rural, and it's a bunch of white people who are lower income, and they're standing in line talking about everything Trump is gonna do for them. And he's like, Trump is about to do stuff for me, you know, not you. Like, I'm a millionaire. Trump is not doing anything for you. And then when we talk about social media, Trump is a very big part of that. But there's Kanye West. And as a Black person, I want us all to succeed. This is a public health group, and I pray for his mental health and all of that, but all skin folk ain't kinfolk. And I don't know what his motive is, but I do know that some of the people who are blindly following him are hindering everyone's ability to be educated about the political decisions that we need to make. And his public push for office, as well as the big fight between Trump and Biden, is this whole gaslighting that we're eating up that's pushing us away from the real issues, which Kayla mentioned. The biggest one is the Supreme Court justice pick. And I think Tomasa Cruz, one of you were talking about the local election and local authorities that are going to be put in place, because that's what's most important. And I know I've said that before to me. And Christian, I think it was Christian. No, actually it was Cole, I'm sorry. You were talking about how people are losing friends over the election and you hate to see it happening. I don't. It's fine. It's perfectly fine. Because like we discussed earlier, politics were not designed where we should be fighting the way we are, but we are. And that's because if you're allowed to say certain things and people are okay with that, then that's a problem for me. Tomas was talking about how some of his family members were scared to if your people are scared to talk about a candidate because they might be picked up and hauled off somewhere, or my people are scared to go vote because we might be lynched, dragged, tarred and feathered and whatever else, then it's more than just about politics. And saying that you're disengaged, people like to say, oh, I'm not gonna pick, or I'm in Maryland now and our governor said, oh, well, you know, I'm a write in Reagan because I don't know what's going on right now. That's privilege. You have the privilege to say that you're not going to be engaged because the stuff that these people are talking about aren't affecting you. So I'm not sensitive. This is not about, you know, me losing a friend because you're a Democrat. This is, I'm taking you out of my circle because either you're a racist, a misogynist, and a terrible person, or you're just dumb and you're saying stuff out of your mouth that you're not looking up. And I don't associate with that. So I'm perfectly fine with, with losing friends, associates, or coworkers because of that, because it is a bigger issue. And Jasmine earlier wanted to chime in and talk about how when she went to go vote for Obama in 2012, she thought she was going to vote for Obama and she did not realize all the other stuff that was on the ballot. And political engagement for minority people is so low. And then the ones who do try to make an effort, the system is designed in a way where we won't be able to succeed because it shouldn't be this hard to get resources. You know, we should know what's on a ballot. We should know what we're going to vote for. And the law should not be written in a way where we don't know, you know, what we're voting on when we go in there. It should be plain. And so that the other thing Jasmine wanted me to mention was she wanted me to give a shout out to the Michigan voters who just passed same day. One second. Early voting and same day voting. And she wants to make sure that everyone knows that we need to make nationwide voting and election day. It needs to be a holiday. And I agree with her. Tomas, earlier you were saying your parents were taking off work to go vote. And that's something I'm very proud to hear you say, because I know people who would not, if their job didn't afford them the couple hours to go vote before, after, or during work, they wouldn't do it. And I do think if people can lose their lives to vote, you can lose a couple dollars to vote, or you can lose a half hour to go vote. But that is another hindrance that we have, because they'll make it take much longer. You won't know where you're supposed to go and stuff like that. So it's a lot. And Kayla, every time you get on, you got these facts ready and these statistics, and I greatly appreciate it, because everybody who has a platform does not need or deserve the platform they have, because people out here just be saying anything. And I appreciate every Black person that finds the bag and gets it. But some of this stuff that people are getting famous for is not helpful. And as much as I love us to go find a book and read a book, some of y'all read one book and, you know, cook up some stuff that everybody that has a platform does not need one. And I appreciate you all who come with the facts and actually look up the things that you need to be talking about. So
great. I want to share Monisha, and then we'll go to Tomas. Monisha put in the chat, she wanted to say that she thinks social media is showing who people really are. Unfortunately, friendships are breaking up, but I think it's okay, because I'm at the point to where I'm understanding that everybody in my life is not designed to be in my life forever. There are some things called seasonal friends. They're meant to be in your life for a season. And it's okay to let people go and grow. Like let them go, let them grow, and they need to let me go and let me grow. And I'm okay with that, you know? So I do agree with the fact that we're starting to see who people really are on social media. Go ahead, Tomas.
Yeah, don't worry, I'm gonna keep it brief because I know that we're kind of running on some time here, but I was basically kind of gonna say about how I think social media, though it has many negative aspects to it as far as politics and division and whatnot, that actually, once again, if you take a deep breath, go back to the curriculum of Peeping Game, you will kind of notice how certain political figures, how they at first try to present themselves in a certain manner on the national television or whatever have you, or at large speeches and whatnot, they begin to unravel. I mean, I mean, kind of right now, it's really obvious to see it in the debates, how certain people unravel and, you know, kind of in front of our eyes. But I would say that social media is kind of the behind the scenes, you know, the part of it in whatever election, but kind of really a lot in this election, like outside of the little rose garden speeches that, you know, certain, and I know I'm being obvious, trying to code it up, but I'm gonna just say, that Trump is having, you just see the behind the scenes. The same thing with Biden or like whoever else, Kamala, you see their personalities, you see what they're like in, you know, behind the curtain, you know, you kind of see who they are, what they're like. You might learn some more facts. And I think also social media has provided us with ways to educate ourselves more on certain issues and kind of about certain politicians. Though you got to be careful because there's a lot of misinformation. Like you just see already at the title, conservative power, that kind of, you know, something like that, underscore. You'll already know that certain people are really biased and are going to just spit out random stuff. But if you kind of go to the more, I don't know, because if you go to the more kind of like, I don't know, because just because you're certified doesn't mean, because, you know, there's some certified, you know, celebrities right now that are not spitting, you know, what's good for the kin or whatever, my skin, the kin, you know, they're not really doing that at all. They're doing what's killing. But, you know, kind of to go back to what I was saying, if you go to people who have a reputation of spitting good news like PBS or the Soapbox Stand, they're biased, but I like them though. So but they kind of tell you what you don't hear, you know, or the TED Talks or NPR, you know, kind of go to the more neutral places and you can really educate yourself. Like me, I never knew about SARS and whatnot. I didn't know that there was a police force in Africa, and, you know, I don't know, I forgot what country it is, but, Nigeria. I didn't know about, I knew that there was, you know, a disease outbreak and stuff, but I didn't know that the police, it was like that there. I didn't know about what was happening to my brothers and sisters in Armenia. My Armenian friend kind of schooled me and let me know that because they're against the Azerbaijan. And I guess America, sometimes they kind of spread misinformation about it and they're trying to make Azerbaijan, I know I'm slaughtering the name, I'm sorry to my Armenian friend Savan, I'm sorry, but Azerbaijan, they're trying to be the victim here when it's the Armenians they went through the genocide back in the early 20th century, and then they're going through, I don't know the exact facts, I don't want to spread misinformation, but long story short, they're really the victim now too. So this kind of further educates you. And lastly, I wanted to make my closing point kind of outside of, or let me tie this one more point and then I'll make this last point. But kind of within it, I was going to say how a lot of our generation, and it's kind of a curse, a lot of us are lazy. We don't want to go and research the facts and learn about certain politicians, which is why social media can be good to kind of educate people right when they're going on their feet. But like I said, you got to kind of research the page, look at it. Maybe, I mean, you can Google anything. You can Google, you know, the DoorDash delivery. You can do all this. So why can't you Google about who is this person? Who's that president and whatnot? So, you know, I just want to
your mind.
Media has been, you know, good in a way, more convenient for us youth, but I don't feel too comfortable. Don't be lazy. But my last point I was going to say is there's a lot of people out there that are like, oh, you know, I don't like Biden and I don't like Trump. I don't like this. I don't like that. I don't like Kamala. I don't like, you know, and I just kind of wanted to say that it's not a dedication. It's not a you know, like when you're choosing them, it's not like you love them. You're giving a Valentine's Day card or proposing to any candidate. It's more like you're in gym, right? And you're picking teams, you know, and you join the team that, you know, you're going to work together. You know, you might not agree with your teammates, but you're going to work together in the dodgeball, kickball game, whatever. And you're going to make it through and they can benefit you. They impact you, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have to like them. You kind of, you know, but I just wanted to say that it's not a proposal to them. It's not a Valentine's Day, a candygram. It's nothing like that. Oh, I love, you know, all of that is nothing like that. It's just another chess piece move in life. And, you know, that leads to many other moves that impact you. So that's just what I want to say to all the people out there, you know, as we described in the last show, you know, through taxes, how your money is spent, what healthcare you get, you know, all of that is determined by who's the head of state. So I just wanted to, you know, kind of point that out there, that don't twist that up, whether it be the religious things, like we said earlier. I mean, we don't never want to criticize harshly anybody, but it's just like a reanalysis of yourself. It's a reanalysis of your theism and theology, all of that, and kind of just do what God would do, you know. So
great. Thanks, Tomar.
Yeah.
So we've had some interesting conversation. We kind of want to wrap it up with our final question. But again, just remember that voting is right now a lifeline for many people. And it is something that will impact us in many different ways, as Tomas has said. And so we're the Flint Public Health Youth Academy, and all youth are not old enough to vote, you know? And so we're gonna have our last question read, and we're gonna talk about possibly some things that young people can do. Go ahead. What's the last question?
Okay, I'll go ahead and do the last question. Okay, speaking of social media, what are some creative ways that youth can advocate and encourage the adults in their life to vote? Okay, we will do Kayla first.
So I, for one, have been very active in voting in the voting process for several years now. And this is actually my first year where I'm able to actually vote in the election. So I say that to say that there are many ways that we as young people, even prior to being voting age, can be active in the voting process. And so me personally, I always went the route of just being like, hey, let's talk. And if it's like my grandma, my grandpa, like they want to talk anyway. They ready to catch up. They want to know what's going on in my life. They want to know what my grades have been like for real. Just, hey, how are you? I just want to, I personally would say go down your contact list. If they're voting age, hey, we ain't talked in a minute. What's going on with you? How has your life been? Man, you know, everything's really crazy right now with the election going on. Are you voting? You know, I just want to have the facts ready. I just was wondering, oh, you said you're voting for so-and-so? Oh, well, did you know this? Did you know this about their administration? Did you know this about what he's done? Do you know this about what he stood for? Do you know this about, and make it a conversation. I would also say for those of you who are still eating dinner at the dinner table with your family, that's a great time to bring up politics. Like, why not? We're in the middle of a presidential debate. So, I mean, just so Ma, how was your day at work? It was good. They were stressing you out. Who are you voting for? Like, let's be frank. Let's be frank. Let's be honest. Let's be loving. But also, let's acknowledge the fact that these are conversations that we need to be having with our loved ones. Like, if anyone, you should not be tiptoeing around these conversations with your loved ones. So I would just say, first, as a young person, educate yourself as if you were voting. Like, don't do the minimum just because you know you can't vote. No, educate yourself on these people because eventually you will vote. So first, educate yourself, and then just have conversation with these people, and bring the facts with you. Because honestly, I would say I think in my experience, people are excited to just know like the young person in their life is smart enough to do research for themselves in the first place.
Great. Anyone else want to talk about some things young people can do? Everett, I see your hand up.
Yeah, being somebody that can't vote, not a voting age right now. I'm not gonna say I've done the best job of getting people out there to vote and really expressing how I feel about it, but I am doing better and I'm trying my best to continue to do better. But I just want to say for like all the people out there watching this, like me, like you gotta say something. Like maybe you don't have to be the most opinionated or know all the facts, but you gotta say something. You gotta say, hey, well, I know this. I don't know everything, but I do know this. So you gotta talk to the people and become educated, like Kayla was saying. Like for me, the biggest thing this year for me, and even last year and years before, is becoming educated about winning, because there was so many things that I didn't know that now I do know in the matter, like the blink of an eye, that I just, all it took was a little bit of research, and now I'm educated and I can make an educated decision or have an educated conversation about voting. And that's what you should strive towards. Not being the most perfect person and knowing all the answers, but at least knowing something. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Cruz?
So a lot of your options are limited because Rona, but some things to throw out there potentially when if you're still young that you can't vote is you can help candidates by door knocking. You know, that's not necessarily the funnest thing, but that's a route you could take. Kayla's and Everett's point really makes sense in the case that where the people around you are voting for is going to impact you, especially as youth. Whether it's, you know, voting for school board, voting on how much schools get and things like that, or it could be as simple as, you know, presenting resources in the community so that you can live in a community that's good for you, whether that's, you know, reopening parks or things like that. And so really it's learning a little bit, educating yourself, and then speaking to people that you think will listen. I mean, maybe there are some people that you can't speak to about this type of thing. And so you might have to figure out who you can. But for the people that you can speak to, they should know how you feel. It should take you into mind when they're voting behind that ballot. Like, oh, my younger cousin or my nephew spoke to me, and this thing is really important to them. And so I'll take it into consideration when I'm voting now. And that stuff does matter because people are busy. I'm not really a full adult. I mean, legally I am, but I find myself busy. So I'm not surprised when, you know, my mom or, you know, any other adult that's in my life, you know, doesn't have the time to research. That's not to say that they shouldn't, because they definitely should. But if you can help them out in the process, it's a good idea.
Great. Anyone else? So I'll just say to all the other young people, you know, you may not be old enough to vote, but if you're old enough to drive, maybe you can, you know, pledge to drive 5 or 6 people to the polls. Or you may not be old enough to drive, but you definitely got a smartphone and you got about 4 or 5 cousins and uncles and aunties you can call and just nag them until they show you the sticker, send a picture of I voted, and make sure that they've done it. So there's so many things that you can do, even as a youth, to ensure that you're a part of the election process. So anyone else have any final comments before we shut this down? Hearing none, well, thank you all out in social media land for joining the Flint Public Health Youth Academy in our talk show series, A Youth Perspective. We're on every other Friday at 6:30, so we won't be on next Friday, but the Friday after that, we'll be right back here sharing not only things that affect us from a policy and a political perspective, but we're public health. And so public health is everything. We're talking about social justice issues. We're talking about health, environment, everything that you can think of, because public health is everything. So we thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Have a great evening. Goodbye, everybody.